Welcome to the Academic Woman Amplified podcast. I'm your host, Kathy Mazak, tenured full professor, mom of three, and firm believer that the culture of academia needs to change radically. Women are revolutionizing academia within institutions that were not built for us. If you're ready to reject the culture of overwork, kick guilt and overwhelm to the curb, and amplify your voice to make a real impact on your field without breaking down or burning out, you're in the right place. And it all starts with writing. Let's go. You might have heard the phrase that publications are currency in academia. What does that really mean? How do publications add value, represent us, and give us something tangible to take with us on our journey of creation? That's what we're talking about today on the podcast. It probably sounds super capitalist to talk about publications as currency. And if you're a fan of the podcast, you know that one of my favorite books is The Slow Professor, which critiques the role of academia and the positioning of academia inside of fast capitalism. So I want to break down what this idea of publications as currency really means and kind of reframe it from my perspective. So here's how I want you to think about your academic career. Your academic career is a process of creation. What we do as academics is we create things, right? We create knowledge through our research. We create courses and learning experiences. We actually create the universities where we operate, right? So really what we do, the main bread and butter of the academic career, is about creation. And publications are one way to think about our creation, and they act as receipts of that creation. So the way that they do this is they get circulated. Your publications, like your creations in the form of publications, get circulated among other academics mostly and taken up almost in the same way as ideas and memes, right? Get circulated, taken up, repurposed, and rethought about. And that's how kind of idea exchange works. So the metaphor of currency, it does make sense if we think about economies of ideas or we think about how ideas function and that they have value, that this process of creation, which is our academic work, is about creating something that has value in the world, has value to humanity, has value to science, to understanding. And so that is the real currency of your publications, is that the way that they embody your ideas and help to spread them among other academics. Now, there are lots of other valuable contributions to creation that you do during your academic career, right? Teaching is creation, service work is creation, but like currency, publications are mobile. You can take them with you along your journey of creation, no matter what the container through which you're creating is. So sometimes your teaching work and your service work isn't valued in the same way as you move from institution to institution or from container to container, because what creating a course over here for this specific audience doesn't mean the same thing in the context of a new university. Or the service work that you did it's just not as easy to understand it or figure out what its equivalencies are in the context of other universities. It can be done, obviously, but it's not the same as publications, which you can take along with you more readily. They're more portable, the way that currency is a more portable way to exchange value. So to continue this metaphor, I like to think about publications as building a bank. And it's not just the quantity of investments in your portfolio that count, right? It's the quality. And as you move through your career, your publications are evidence of that value that you're creating in the world. So I want to both critique the idea of publications as currency and dig a little bit more into that and what it means, and also understand the metaphor, right? And understand why, if publications are currency, then that means that our writing needs to take a more central role in our careers. Writing is central to your career. It's just sometimes it's not getting the time and the placement within your time that it needs to really step into that role. So let's talk a little bit about the critique of publications as currency. So certainly when people say publications are the currency of academia, they mean certain types of publications. They mean peer-reviewed journal articles. They mean books from good presses. They have a specific thing in mind when they say that. And I think that that specific thing that people have in mind is something that we need to question. So one way that I see a lot of academics who I work with feeling stressed and frustrated and unsure is about which journal to choose when you are looking for a place to submit your work. And part of that has to do with this idea of publications as currency, because the value of a publication in a certain type of journal is going to be more than that same publication that comes out in a different journal. And again, according to the kind of culture of academia and the value systems, which I think, again, we need to question, in which we operate. So I want you to be thinking about those bigger value systems, but then I also want you to think about your own value system. For example, do you want to submit your work and have it come out in certain prestigious journals for prestige alone? What does that prestige that you're going for, how are you going to use that to create the career you want? And could you have the same results in terms of the career that you want to build by submitting to different journals where perhaps you'll more closely hit your target audience? So I want you to always think about these accepted ideas inside of academia, right? This one that we're talking about today, the publications as currency. I want you to think about them. And then I also want you to question them and, resist them if it makes sense for you. I really want your body of work that you put into the world to be representative of you, to be your communication of the thoughts that you have, of the knowledge making that you're doing. And that is going to be much more valuable in terms of your career than the simple value of publishing in a certain prestigious journal. So I always want to be questioning these kind of received ideas about academic culture and see where we can push back against them, instead of just receiving these kind of cultural norms inside of this thing called academia. Let's push back against them and let's think, how can I make norms that serve me and serve what I really want in my career? We've mentioned now that publications are receipts, right? They're receipts for those creations and those ideas that you put out into the world. And those receipts are kind of portable and they have a certain value, especially when you're on the job market, but also when you're applying for grants and going up for promotion. Those publications as receipts of your creative work have influence. But I also want you to think about other things that could be receipts of your creative work. And this is something that I think that there's lots of conversations inside of academia going on about, but that the norm for hiring and for tenure and promotion is still really this narrowly defined publications as currency idea. When really we want to have our creative work influencing the people or systems that we want to try to change. And so that doesn't always best happen through a peer-reviewed journal article. So one kind of easy way to think about this is in terms of public scholarship, in terms of writing something perhaps that is for your local newspaper or for a national newspaper or for some other kind of publicly consumed media. This could also be things like having a YouTube channel or being active on social media and getting your ideas out there that way. I think there's lots of opportunity for opening up and loosening a little bit those very strict constraints on the types of publications that are currency. And I think that the only way that that's going to happen is by us as scholars continuing to do that work and having it be impactful. So becoming an expert that gets featured on your local news. If you're a bilingual education expert, when they need someone to talk about bilingual ed, they call you. That kind of community, you're getting your message out to the community also needs to be recognized. And so I want to be very clear that I'm not saying that if you're not doing that, that there's something wrong with that. But what I am saying is that for those of us who feel pulled to communicate our creations through different types of media that aren't just articles in certain journals or books with certain presses, that we feel like we can start to think about the ways in which we can use those things as currency as well, that those things can also be receipts of our creative endeavors. Part of this is achieved by framing and telling your career narrative in a way that highlights and appropriately communicates the value of all kinds of writing that you do or all kinds of work that you do, right? So that we can start to open up the idea of what is currency inside of academia and really question, like, are just these like kind of navel gazing journals, like, is that what really should be currency? Or how can we think of ways to make impact that kind of don't have anything to do with quote unquote impact factor? So I think a lot of you have already been questioning this and feeling like a little bit trapped inside of the kind of academic cultural value of publications are currency. And that, of course, that means certain types of publications are valued more than others. I think a lot of you are already thinking about how that is not just, it's not equitable. It shuts certain communities out, especially from getting that kind of currency that's going to get them literally more money in terms of getting promoted or in terms of getting the jobs, certain jobs that they want. So I think that what we need to do is always come back to our academic mission statement and always come back to stepping into the power of creating what you want for yourself. So when we think about publications as currency and hold them up against what we want to create for ourselves, that's where we need to figure out the relationship between those two things. How are we going to, get what we want in our careers and also push back against some of these norms that say, well, only this type of publishing is acceptable. In this last bit of the podcast, I want to talk about using your publications to get what you want. I want to talk about strategy around publishing. So you might be asking yourself, well, what do I mean when I say to make the career that you want? So one of the things that I teach inside of my programs, and I do get on a soapbox about this, is that you are more in charge of your career than you think. There are a lot of injustices and inequities inside of academia, right? It's a racist, patriarchal, ableist system. At the same time that that's true, it's also true that you deserve to have the kind of career that you want, working the hours that you want, feeling the amount of stress that you want and not more, and really living out your purpose in the way that you want to, under the conditions through which you want to do that. Now, there's lots of times when it feels like we are not in charge of those conditions. For example, we might work with colleagues that we don't enjoy. We might work within bureaucratic systems that we find oppressive. There's lots and lots of places where we can feel underappreciated and powerless inside of big systems that weren't really created for us. But you are worthy of having that career and that life that you want. And as I always tell my clients, the more you are happy and joyful in your career, the better your contribution to the world is going to be. And that's my kind of selfish reason maybe for wanting you to step into your power to control your career. It's that I want you to make the kind of knowledge that the world needs. We can't have so many people, especially those who have been socialized as women, silenced by oppressive systems. So when we think of publications as currency, I want you to, instead of thinking about this outwardly, how do the systems position publications as currency? And I want you to start thinking of it inwardly. How can I position my publications as currency? How can I create an exchange of value around my publications so that I get more of the things that I want? More time, more peace, more joy, more whatever, right? More resources, perhaps. So that's how I want you to start thinking about this idea of publications as currency. I want you to turn it on its head a bit. So what does this mean? What am I really asking you to do? What I'm asking you to do is think about your publications in terms of what you want them to do for you. What doors do you want them to open? Who is the audience of those publications? And how do you want your ideas to influence them? That is really the basis behind a publication strategy. But first, what you need to do is figure out what you do want your career to look like and how you want to use writing and publishing to create the situation of your career to be what you desire. I'll tell you a quick story that maybe I've told on the podcast before, but it's about my first grant writing project. So when I first started out on the tenure track, it was about 2006, and I started at the University of Puerto Rico in Mayagüez, and we really were not technologically up to speed at our university. We were operating in classrooms where we had probably 20 classrooms currently running, and we had 3 overhead projectors that we would need to check out in a handwritten checkout system so that we could use an LCD projector, to use PowerPoint slides in our classroom. I mean, it was really a situation that was not how I wanted to teach. I didn't want to be fighting for resources, and I wanted to be able to teach in a classroom where we had all the things we needed in terms of technology and comfort in order to teach a class that I thought would be effective. And so what I did was I thought, okay, well, what can I do to really outfit this classroom the way that I need it to be, and to get the grad student help around creating a new curriculum. And so, long story short, we applied for a USDA Hispanic Serving Institutions grant to create a project where we created an agriculture-based curriculum for our English students. And that grant got us $250,000 to do the work of outfitting that room, creating that new curriculum, and doing it with the support of graduate research assistants. So we could really do good evaluation on what we did and actually increase the teacher-student ratio in those courses. At the time I was teaching, these courses are what we would call the basic level English. They're ESL courses that are pre-first year composition courses, I guess, is the best way to describe them. So the writing I did to get that grant, and then the writing I did after in order to get the next grant, was really about me creating the situation in which I wanted to work. So I said, what do I need to be my most effective? Well, I need grad student help. I need course release time, and I need technology. I want laptops for all my students. I want a smart board. I want a projector mounted to the ceiling. Is that too much to ask for? So I was like, well, the university doesn't have the money to support me in this. I'm going to go out and I'm going to find the money and create that for myself. And we did. Oh, and we had money for traveling and presenting. And really, we set ourselves up as a research group, my colleagues and I, for what would become a really lovely line of research that became books and publications and more grants out into the future. But the question, or the thing that drove that first grant project was, how can I create the situation, the working conditions that I want to experience? And my answer was, I need some funding, and I want the funding to do these things. So similarly, I want you to think about your career. Like, what are the working conditions in which you want to operate? And then how can I use my publications to make those working conditions a reality? This involves you thinking a lot about yourself, right? Which might feel a little uncomfortable. You might be thinking like, she's asking me a lot about what I want, and that can feel really uncomfortable to people socialized as women. But it's really important and very powerful to identify what you want and then use your amazing brain, which I know you all have, to create that for yourself. That's very, very powerful. And that's how I want you to think about publications as currency. How can my publications create for me the ideal working conditions that I want? Here's another example, right? You might need certain publications to switch jobs because the situation that you're in, no amount of funding would change it to be what you wanted. So you really need to move institutions, and you need those publications in order to be competitive on the market. So that's thinking about your publications as currency to get what you want, instead of publications as currency to meet some kind of like imposed upon you requirements. Are you meeting imposed upon you requirements? Yes. But the reason that you're doing it is to create the situation where you can thrive. And that's how to really use publications, as currency. Before I leave you today, you might be thinking, that sounds great. I really want to do that, but I can't seem to get my butt in the chair to get the writing done. Well, we have a program for you. It's called Momentum, and it is a $27 a month membership that provides you with the writing group that will scaffold you into figuring out how to hold space and time for your writing. What we do in Momentum is we do co-writing. We get together on the Zoom and quietly write together. We track our goals, we express our goals, we meet our goals and celebrate them. Every Monday, we do a Monday mindset call that works on the kind of head gunk that you got to get rid of to get your butt in the chair and keep your appointments with your writing. If you're interested in joining us, the link is in the show notes. It's kathymazak.com/momentum. You can go and sign up today and start writing with us tomorrow. Thank you so much for spending your valuable time loving on yourself and your writing by listening to this episode. If you're feeling pulled in 1,000 directions and can't seem to carve out time to write, I've got a solution for you. Go grab my 10 ways to make time to write cheat sheet. Just go to kathymazak.com/podcast-time to learn my best quick tips for putting writing at the center of your career where it belongs. We'll link that up in the show notes. Just go to kathymazak.com/podcast-time.